Welcome to this introduction to geographical data linkage using Understanding Society. I'm Jack Neeshaw, I'm Executive Director for Understanding Society, and one of my responsibilities is overseeing the data linkage activity that we do on the study. It's great to see, as I say, so many people attending today, and as I say, it's nice to see some familiar and some old faces amongst those numbers. And we're hoping that some of you are, after this next hour, inspired to use our geographical identifiers and matching linked open data. So just something about the format of the next 60 minutes. There'll be a presentation to take up the first part of the hour, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions towards the end. Christian Garrich is our survey data linkage officer. He's going to lead us through the presentation. And I think one of his early slides actually talks about housekeeping. One of the things is we'd like you to keep your audio muted. Possibly it doesn't matter whether we can see you or not, but I think the audio muted is the key part. Christina will explain that you can add questions in the chat, but I don't want to take up too much of his presentation, so I'm going to hand over to you, Christian, and you can take us through the first part of the next hour.
Thank you, Jack. So once again, hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Christian Garrich, and I'll be your host for today. So before we start with the content of presentation, I'll go through a couple of housekeeping rules. So as Jack mentioned, we'll kindly ask you to keep your cameras off and microphones muted at all times. If you have a question, please use the chat function, and please note that your question will be visible to all attendees. We'll have a dedicated slots for questions at the end of the presentation. If any of the questions remain unanswered, you can send us an email. For any kind of technical issues, please email Jay at Yolanda James Essex UK. And at the end, we'll be grateful for your feedback. So please do follow the link in the email sent after the webinar to complete the survey. So this session will be recorded. Slides and recording will be made available after the session. You'll be notified when the session will be recorded. Then you can opt to stay or leave. Please do note that your names and cameras won't be visible on the recording. And once again, thank you for joining us today. So here's a brief overview of the things that I'll cover today. First, I'll introduce you to our study. Then I'll cover the concept of data linkage and geographical data. So what is geographical data and what level of geographies we have in the UK and in our study. After that, I'll cover how you can access data, what is our data structure, and how data can be linked. And at the end, I'll cover some other data linkage activities at our study, Understanding Society. So first, we'll start with the introduction to Understanding Society. So in this diagram, you can see some of the important parts of our study. First, I'll start with the innovation panel. So innovation panel started as a sample of 1,500 households in which people were asked the same questions and as they were asked in main survey. And the purpose of innovation panel is to be used as a test bed for research and methodological innovation. For example, it helped researchers to see how wording of questions affected how these questions are answered. The focus of this presentation is main survey. So in the next slides, I'll cover aspects of the main survey. And lastly, I would like to mention COVID-19 survey. So from April 2020 to September 2021, participants for our main Understanding Society sample were asked to complete a short web survey. For some ones, they could opt for a telephone option as well. And this survey covered the changing impacts of the pandemic on the welfare of the UK individuals, families, and wider communities. Here you can see that I've provided the links for more detail about each of the mentioned surveys. So regarding our main main survey, and main study, the UK household longitudinal study. So Understanding Society surveys a sample of individuals representing the UK population for interview within a household context, which means that we start with a randomly selected sample of households. We collect information about all residents in these households. These residents and their offsprings form the core sample, and these core sample members are followed over their life course at 1-year intervals when within the UK. And we refer to these intervals as waves. Understanding Society builds on its predecessor project, the British Household Panel Survey, which started in 1991, and it was incorporated in 2009 when Understanding Society started. Field work takes 2 years, but participants are interviewed annually. Besides basic demographic information such as sex, age, or ethnicity, the survey also collects information in some of the key topics such as education, employment, family, and household, and etc. And some other informations are collected as well in other topics that are asked during the interview, such as neighborhood characteristics, beliefs such as religion, identity, gender roles, attitudes, leisure activities, transport use, and so on. On this slide, which is our long-term content plan, you can see which of the modules were asked annually and repeatedly, and which of the modules were asked only in certain ways. And at the bottom of this slide, I have provided a link in which you can explore our long-term content plan. So what information is collected from whom? So we collect basic socio-demographic information about every member of the household. We also collect information about the household itself, so household amenities, expenses, rent and mortgages, or deprivation. And we also collect information about members of the enumerated household, either to personal interviews with the individuals or self-completion online survey. These questionnaires are divided and they depend on the age of the participants. So those aged between 10 and 15, they respond in the youth questionnaire, which is a paper booklet, and those age over 16, they respond in adult questionnaire. Some information about 0 to 9 years old are collected from their parents or guardians. Since our study is quite large and complex, we created some navigation tools that should help you navigating through information and finding the information that you need about our study. And here in Pathway to Understanding Society, you have everything saved on one link. And on that link, you can explore the main features of our study. So now I'll start with introduction to data linkage and geographical data. So what is data linkage? Data linkage is basically linking data about the same entities, for example, individuals or households, from multiple data sources into a single data set. These records are typically linked at the individual level, but the data can also be linked at the household, institutional, or in this case, at area level. When we talk about the geographical linkage at Understanding Society, we talk primarily about linking our data, Understanding Society data, to external data sources at the area level using geographical identifiers. Some of the advantages of such linkage is a high number of publicly available data sources which can be linked at the area level to our data, which increases the scope of research. And one of the interesting and really useful features is the fact that the data can be linked by researchers themselves. In the UK, and you can see it here, we have a list of 8 main types of geographies in the country. So the first 3 are most common and the one that you'll see in majority of open data sources. And in this illustration, and hopefully I can zoom a bit of it. Yeah. Here you can see the complexity of the geographies in the UK and complexity of hierarchical structure and how that structure differ from country to country. So it's important to keep these things in mind when you look for open data sources and when you want to link them at the geographical level. I'll zoom it out so you can see the complex structure and complex hierarchical representation of the UK statistical geographies. How this relates in real space. So here you can see the map of the UK and you can see certain divisions. So one of the highest area level when we talk about administrative divisions are regions. So regions are 9 English regions that were established in 1994 for purposes of devolving power in government, but that was abandoned in 2011. Regardless of that, they were still kept as a mean of administrative division and for statistical purposes. And one of the things that is important to mention here that when we talk about regions, 9 English regions are often accompanied with Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, which they're not regions, but they're often accompanying a data set that are presenting data at the regional level. And here you can see black lines that divide the 9 regions of England, and different colors relates to different types of administrative units and local authorities. So not all geographies are available in Understanding Society. So we have a lookup table that will help you to see what the geographical identifiers are available at Understanding Society. Lower level geographies also implies restrictive access to a certain data set. It's important to have that in mind because granular data imposes higher disclosure risk, which means that access to certain lower geographies is restricted, and I'll cover that in the next slide. So when we talk about Understanding Society data that is deposited at the UKDS, we have 3 types of access. First, the least restrictive one is end-user license access. So in this data set, we have less restrictive survey responses. We have, for example, direct biomeasures and selected blood analytes and quantiles of index of multiple deprivation. When we talk about geographies, in EUL, we have country, governmental office regions or regions, and condensed urban-rural classification. When we talk about who can access it, so data can be accessed by anyone once registered with the UK Data Service where our data is deposited. A bit higher level of and more restricted level of access is a special license access. So in this data set, we have more sensitive survey responses such as month of birth, detailed country of birth. And one of the things that we would like to mention is that it's important before you apply for special license, which can be which is a particular process. It is useful to compare the variables between the EUL and the SL version of the dataset because, for example, maybe the dataset that you need is located already in the less restrictive EUL axis. When we talk about available geographies, we talk about geographies between regions and LHOAs, and usually, not usually, we have only one geographical identifier per data set. When we talk about who can access it, that can really vary from data set to data set. So I have included the link that explains in details how you can access special license data. And of course, it is always useful before you apply for a certain data set, when you know for what data set you want to apply for, to read the documentation about it, and which access and level of access and conditions on access will be indicated. And the most restrictive access is the secure access. So I would also like to mention that besides UKDS, secure access data is also available at ONS Secure Research Service. And when we talk about these data sets, they contain variables such as exact date of birth. And when we talk about geographies, these are geographies usually below local authorities, for example, grid references of postcode centroids. And when we talk about the access, this type of data can be only accessed by accredited researchers in secure settings, meaning that to use secure data, secure access data sets, researchers must be either UK-based or able to access data at limited number of non-UK safe rooms. So now I'll continue with accessing the data. What is the data structure and how data can be linked? On this video presented by UKDS, UK Data Service, you have a convenient and short overview how you can access and download data. So in this 10-minute video, you have everything that you need explained how to access and how to apply for access for data sets. I won't be playing this video now, but you'll have it in your materials when you receive them after the session. I'll quickly pause this and continue with the presentation. So when we talk about linking our geographically linking our data, you have two options. You can use prepared data that was already linked by Understanding Society. So we have linked the number of neighborhood indicators using the responding household's address information. The list of the data set is here, or you can link your own data by using geographical identifiers to link Understanding Society data to external data sources. And as I mentioned before, here you can see that you have one geographical identifier per data set. So what to do after you download the data? So in this example, you can see what would be, or what is supposedly one of the examples, what would be and what will happen when you download the data set. So besides the folder containing the actual data files, you also have file information and other descriptive information that can be accessed even before obtaining access to the data set. So it is important to mention that you have access to, for example, data dictionaries or study information on the UKDS webpage, even before you apply for the particular data set or you obtain the access for it. And these slides shows you what would be the content of the data folder once when you receive the files. And here you can see numerous files that start with alphabetical letters. I'll quickly. So what you can see here, it's basically structure and a work. So first of all, it's a structure of the data set, and then explains what file contains what, and W just denotes the wave, because we use alphabet to denote the sequences of waves. For example, A is wave 1, B is wave 2, and etc. And on this slide, you can see some of the main files explained, and others should be available on the link here. So when we talk about linking the files, one of the important variables that you'll use to link the files, for example, and link the data set, Understanding Society data set, ones that contain geographical identifiers and other that contain other data. So for that purpose, you'll use a household identifier. And here you can see how that identifier variable allows you to connect to connect and connect other files into one data set. Full list of files and their explanation can be found here. When we talk about open data sources, the UK has a strong tradition of publishing and sharing data across different organizations and departments, which means that we have a variety of useful socioeconomical data that is available on topics such as fuel consumption, health, or, for example, statistics on social housing. When we talk about the geographical level of data, the data is usually available at regional and local authority levels, including statistical geographies up to LSOL level and its equivalents. And here you can see two main websites where these open data sources can be found. Because we have almost unlimited number of open data sources that can be linked to Understand Society, we wanted to create a tool that will help users navigate through the available open data sources. So the tool or the list inform users what kind of data is collected, for which period, and at which geographical level. And most importantly, if the data set is geographically compatible with our geographical identifiers. So here's a short preview of the table. So here you can see the domain in which data set can be put. You can see the name of the data set, the data owner, brief explanation and description of the data set, access link to it, what kind of format is data saved in, and time components of data, for example, the seasonality of data collection, since when the data is available, for which geographical coverage, and at which geography. For certain data set, we also include comment that, for example, indicates if the earlier versions of the data sets are available at, for example, National Archive. So here's a short workflow of how you would link open source data to Understand Society using geographical identifiers. So first of all, you will select one of the data sets from our list that we suggested, or you would find your own data set. Then you would check available geographies and see if the both are present in our data and open source data set. Depending on the level of geography, you would either apply for EUL or SL version of the data set. And lastly, when you obtain access to it, you would link the two data sets. So how to do the linking? So in order to link information from two different data sets at the geographical level, we need to use some kind of a linking variable that will allow us to do that. In this case, geographical identifier, and particularly in this case, we can use an example local authority district. So local authority district are often denoted as a sequence of characters and numbers, and here you can see the example for Colchester, and that number should be same in both our data and open data sets. And here we can see a toy example linking access to a garden space. So here you can see that we use the same variable containing the codes that I mentioned in order to link garden data to Understand Society data. When we talk about processing open data sources in statistical software, it is important to mention that a great majority of open data sources are either in CSV or Excel format. That implies that we often have situations in which data that you need is saved in different worksheets or tabs. So it's important to check what is important once when you import the Excel file in your statistical software. And it is also important to run a summary and descriptive statistic just to check how data is interpreted by the software. So because different statistical software reads some values differently, for example, missing values, or in certain data set, missing values are denoted differently, it is important to run these checks to to make sure that the data was read correctly. And here is just a brief preview how you would do that in Stata. And here you can see how we selected the Excel file, we select the sale range, and we tell Stata to import the first row as variable names. So when we talk about the procedure in merging open data sources using that linking variable, we have two steps. First step is to merge geography and main data files using the household identifier. So because our geographical identifiers are saved in different data sets than the main data files, you need to merge them first. And when you have that file merged, you previously merge understanding society data set to open data sources using, in this case, geographical identifier. So in the first case, you use household identifier to internally merge to understanding society data sets. And in the step 2, you use geographical identifier, for example, LED codes, as it was the example, to merge to open data sources. So here's a brief preview how you do that cross-sectionally. Stata example, so you would load the household response data file, and you would merge it first using the household identifier to the dataset containing geographical identifiers, and then you would merge it to open data source using a geographical identifier. The important thing to mention is that the name of the variable using for merging needs to be the same in the both data set, particularly in a Stata context. And one of the things that I would like also to mention, this is just a brief example and just a short example how you would do that technically in Stata, because we're aware that understanding society is a panel data study, so you would need to merge it over multiple waves and multiple files. So in this case, we just explain on, for example, wave one example. There's also some things to be aware before you link open data sources to understanding society data. It's important to make sure that the timelines are matching, because data collection for different data sets can vary, and seasonality when that data is collected can vary as well. So for example, we can have differences between calendar and financial year, data being collected monthly, quarterly, or yearly. It is also important to pay attention to terminology. So when exploring open data sources, we need to see what information is provided about the available geography. For example, LADs will be often referred as local authorities. And the last thing that it's important to be aware of is changes over time. So because administration in any country develops over time, so administrative units are changed. They change their size over time. In this example, you have change in number of districts in county of Somerset, and below that we also have provided a usable and quite valuable user guide that explains what are the other problems when you link understanding society data to external data sources. And here, for example, we can see the changes and evolutions in local authority districts between 2012 and 2021, hopefully. So, for example, here you can see how situation in 2012 changed in 2021, not only in sizes of certain administrative units, but also in their types. Since it's quite popular to link data at geographical level, I'm presenting you three examples of research that was done by using our data and linking to other data sources at geographical level using geographical identifiers. So we have an example in which our data was linked to annual pollution levels using LSOA. The second example, our data, Google mobility data was linked to weather station using also LSOA. And in the last example, our data and ELSA data was linked to tables that were produced by the Department of Transport using LSOAs, using census lookup tables of LSOAs and MSOAs. We also conduct other type of research at Understanding Society as well. So we have other types of linkage activities as well. Here you can see our web page where you can find more info about these activities. So this web page is conveniently divided in sections based on the type of the linkage. So here you can see list of the available linked data set at the individual level. So we link our data to National Pupil Database for England and Scotland. We also link our data to drivers and vehicle licensing agency data sets. And we're also taking part in the UK longitudinal linkage collaboration. The linkages that we have in progress are linked health data for Scotland and linked auto-enrollment pensions for Nest. Here are some of the useful resources that you can use. First is the user support forum, where you can ask your questions about the study and also see what other questions were asked by other users. We also have the webpage, and on which you can see the list of upcoming trainings and events. We also have a YouTube channel, and this recording will be posted on that YouTube channel, so you can watch it again after this session. And we also prepare and conduct online courses, and to receive any kind of other information for us, you can also sign up for our newsletter.